Rain drizzled softly against the old windows of Maplewood Care Home, tracing fragile lines down the glass like tears. Inside, the scent of chamomile tea and disinfectant lingered, blending into an odd comfort that residents had grown used to. It was a place where stories faded, laughter dimmed, and memories scattered like autumn leaves, until Lena arrived. Lena was 26, a volunteer with eyes that carried a quiet gentleness. She wore simple clothes, soft sweaters, faded jeans, and her chestnut brown hair tied into a low ponytail. There was nothing grand about her presence, yet wherever she went, a certain peace followed. She believed kindness didn't need to be loud, it only needed to be real. Her first day at Maplewood, she met Mr. Everett. He was 82, a retired schoolteacher whose mind had become a labyrinth of half-remembered moments. His days were spent staring out of the window, his thin hands trembling over the blanket that covered his lap. The nurses said he barely spoke anymore. When Lena approached him, he turned his gaze briefly, his pale blue eyes dull with time. "Good morning, Mr. Everett," she said softly. He didn't answer, only blinked slowly. Still, she sat beside him, talking about the weather, the flowers in the garden, and the old oak tree outside. She didn't expect him to respond. She just wanted him to know that someone was there, that silence didn't mean he was forgotten. Days turned into weeks. Lena continued her visits, sitting beside him every afternoon after her shift at the library. Sometimes she read aloud from his favorite book, The Wind in the Willows, and sometimes she just hummed old tunes. It was on one quiet afternoon, while she was reading about Mole and Rat's adventures, that she heard it, a faint whisper. "The riverbank." She froze, the book still open in her lap. "Did you say something, Mr. Everett?" He blinked again, eyes still distant, but his lips curved faintly. "Used to take my wife there. She loved the riverbank." It was the first thing he'd said in months. Lena's heart softened. "That sounds beautiful. What was her name?" "Eleanor," he whispered, eyes glistening. Her laughter was the music of spring. From that day, their conversations grew, fragile at first, like morning light through fog, but steady. Mr. Everett began recalling pieces of his life, his teaching days, and his late wife. Sometimes, he would drift mid-sentence, lost again in the maze of his memories, but Lena stayed patient, waiting for him to return to her world. One evening, as Lena helped him adjust his blanket, he said, "You remind me of my Eleanor." Lena smiled softly. "Was she kind too?" He nodded. Kindness was her way of speaking to the world. Those words stayed with Lena long after she left the care home that evening. Outside of her volunteering, Lena's own world wasn't easy. Her mother had passed away a few years back, and her father, once full of laughter, had grown distant and silent. He spent most of his time in his workshop, repairing old clocks, perhaps because they were easier to fix than his broken heart. Lena often came home to an empty table and the soft ticking of countless clocks echoing in the stillness. Yet, she never complained. She had learned from her mother that kindness wasn't about grand gestures, it was about showing up, even when no one saw. One afternoon, while serving tea to the residents, Lena overheard two nurses talking about Mrs. Green, a new patient with failing eyesight and no family. She had refused to eat or speak since arriving. Lena decided to visit her. Mrs. Green was sitting by her bed, her silver hair combed neatly, her hands folded in her lap. Her cloudy eyes stared into nothingness. "Hello, Mrs. Green," Lena said, setting a cup of warm tea on the bedside table. "I'm Lena. I help around here sometimes." Mrs. Green said nothing. Lena didn't push. She sat down and began talking softly about the roses blooming outside and how the sunlight looked like golden silk across the garden path. For several days, she received no response. Then, one morning, as she described the color of the sunrise, Mrs. Green whispered, "I can almost see it." Lena smiled. "Maybe you don't need eyes to see beauty. Maybe your heart remembers it for you." Mrs. Green's lips trembled into the smallest of smiles. That day, she drank the tea. Weeks passed. Lena became known around Maplewood as the girl who listens. She never rushed anyone, never forced smiles or pity. Her kindness was quiet, a whisper rather than a shout. She began organizing small activities, music evenings, painting sessions, and letter-writing days where residents could write to old friends. Some letters never found their recipients, but it didn't matter. The act of writing rekindled something long asleep in their hearts. Mr. Everett wrote too. His trembling hand scrawled letters to Eleanor, even though she was long gone. Lena would help him fold the pages neatly, placing them in an old envelope he kept by his bedside. "Do you think she gets them?" he asked once. "I think love always finds its way," Lena replied softly. Then came the storm. It was a late autumn night when the power went out in Maplewood. The storm raged outside, wind shrieking through the cracks, rain pounding on the roof. The emergency lights flickered weakly, casting eerie glows through the hallways. Nurses hurried between rooms, trying to calm frightened residents. Lena had stayed late that night to help organize an art display. When the storm hit, she didn't think of leaving. Instead, she grabbed flashlights and went room to room, comforting the elderly, holding their hands, humming old songs to distract them from the thunder. In Mr. Everett's room, she found him shivering, staring at the window where lightning illuminated the sky. "It's just a storm," she said, kneeling beside him. He shook his head weakly. "Eleanor used to hold my hand when it thundered." Without hesitation, Lena took his trembling hand. "Then I'll hold it for her tonight." They sat like that for hours, the storm howling outside, their hands clasped, their hearts steady. When morning came, the storm had passed. Maplewood was safe. But Mr. Everett was gone. He had slipped away peacefully sometime before dawn, his hand still resting in hers. Tears fell silently down Lena's cheeks. The nurses found her sitting beside him, eyes closed in prayer. In his lap lay one of his letters to Eleanor, sealed with a shaky but deliberate hand. She whispered, "You're together now." In the days that followed, Lena struggled with the quietness of his absence. She still came to Maplewood, still smiled for others, but something in her heart ached. One afternoon, the head nurse handed her an old box. "Mr. Everett left this for you," she said. Inside was a small pocket watch and a note written in his unsteady handwriting. "Dear Lena, you reminded me that kindness is the bridge between hearts and time. Keep building those bridges. The world needs them. Everett." Lena wept. That evening, she went to the riverbank he had once spoken of. The water shimmered under the fading sun, and she whispered his words to the wind. The world seemed to pause, as if listening. Somewhere, she imagined, a gentle soul was smiling. Months later, Maplewood transformed. The residents were more lively, laughter echoing down the hallways once again. They had started calling the new garden Eleanor's Corner, after Lena's idea to honor Mr. Everett and his late wife. There, a plaque read, "For all who believe kindness never dies, it only whispers on."